Welcome back to Recruiting Blitz. My name is Verghese. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Before we get started, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and be sure to check out our work over at InsideNebraska.com as well. We've got a lot to get to. Nebraska had a massive recruiting weekend. We've got a ton of intel up already over at InsideNebraska.com, so be sure to check that out, as well as our analysis from the spring game weekend, Steve's final thoughts from Nebraska's Sweet 16 run, and of course the unfortunate loss to Iowa. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about recruiting. Nebraska had over 50 recruits in attendance for the spring game. And we're not going to waste any time getting right into the intel that you want to know coming out of the weekend. So we'll get started in the 27 cycle. Had a few cancellations, of course, for those of you who kept up going into the weekend. Both Mark Matthews, the five-star offensive tackle, and Ahmad Hudson, the five-star tight end, were not able to make it in. For Matthews, it was, I believe, a visit issue, just was not able to make it happen. At this point, if Nebraska is not going to get him on campus before the summer, a potential official visit, just don't really know if this is going to happen for Nebraska. But they're still trying. They're still going to try. With Hudson, it was just a matter of he's had an opportunity, was invited to compete for Team USA on the basketball side of things. He's been invited to minicamp, and that's an opportunity that he simply couldn't pass up, and he's there, and so that's where he's at. Wasn't able to make it to Nebraska. Do expect him back at Nebraska multiple times this offseason. Huskers very much still in the mix. He's in frequent communication with the coaching staff, as well as Nebraska's top commits like Trey Taylor and Tay Ellis in the 2027 cycle. So of the guys that were in town, on the defensive back side of things, it was a good weekend for Addison Williams, defensive backs coach who already holds a commitment from Torrey Pittman, the elite in-state safety prospect, and working on more. And he had two of his top targets in town in Juju Johnson, four-star cornerback out of Long Beach Poly in California. He's a versatile defensive back who can play corner, play nickel, and Nebraska's also pitching him on a roll on special teams because he's electric with the ball in his hands. This is a recruitment that's probably going to play out through the summer. He's got official visits lined up to programs like Oklahoma and Nebraska. Miami's expected to get one. UCLA still in the mix. Programs like Washington still in the mix. This has been, as of late, a Nebraska and Oklahoma battle head to head at the very top. We heard going into the weekend there was some confidence dwindling on the Oklahoma side of things. And it's because of what Nebraska is doing and the effort that Addison Williams has put in, the effort he put in over the weekend with Johnson and his family continues to resonate. I think Nebraska's very well positioned for this recruitment. That said, we'll have to continue recruiting him through June, have to fend off Miami, have to fend off Oklahoma, and going to have to fend off UCLA, a program that would love to keep some top Long Beach Poly talent home. But all things considered, really good weekend for Nebraska and Johnson. I think I'm closer than I was going into the weekend into potentially inputting a prediction in favor of Nebraska. Tavares Harrington, four-star safety out of Mount Carmel High School in Chicago. That's a program Nebraska's plenty familiar with at this point. Landed Claude and Puma out of there this last cycle. Also landed a PWO wide receiver commit from Jamari Brown. They're back in that program, recruiting multiple players across multiple cycles. And program Harrington, right up there among the top targets out of Chicago for Nebraska here in this 2027 cycle. It was his first visit in town. He's a 6'3" safety, stands 180 pounds. Nebraska really battling Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame in that recruitment. Ultimately, think it's going to come down to these four schools. I think Nebraska coming out of this visit has positioned themselves to earn a return official visit, but they got to keep chipping away. I think Alabama and Georgia have given a lot to think about. Notre Dame, a program closer to home, might even be considered the favorite at this point. There's some powers in this recruitment, but Addison Williams has done a lot of good work here. E.J. Barthel as well, Nebraska's guy in Chicago, both done pretty good work in this recruitment. Nebraska just has to keep chipping away, keep at it. He's got some other voices in his ear. He plays on the 7-on-7 circuit with Trey Taylor. He hears from Claude and Puma and more. So, this is one to keep an eye on in the months to come. On the offensive side of the ball, it was still a big weekend for Geep Wade. He had Timmy Aliu, four-star offensive lineman out of Locust Grove, back on campus. This is visit number 3 at this point for Aliu since Geep Wade joined the staff, and he's going to be back for an official visit in the summer. Nebraska's still battling Georgia, Florida, Auburn, but they're at the very top of this recruitment. And I think with each passing visit, continue to create some separation for themselves from the rest of the pack. And in this weekend, we saw him before the game hanging out with Trey Taylor, and Amir Brown and some of the commits. He's moving around campus almost like a commit at this point. I don't necessarily know if a decision is going to come until he makes his official visits, but you have to feel really good about where Nebraska stands. I have a prediction in already for Nebraska to eventually land his commitment. Ian Walker, a rising three-star offensive tackle out of New Jersey, the Pennington School up there, stands 6'5", 305 pounds. Enjoyed his first trip to campus. Nebraska's made it clear he's a guy they want. And coming out of this first trip, sounds like he's planning a return official visit. Still working to line up some details on the dates of that, but it doesn't sound like this is going to be a one and done visit for him. He's going to be back in Lincoln later this offseason. I think a positive note on the commit side of things, Amir Brown, the four-star running back commit, was back on campus, hanging out with Trey Taylor, Tay Ellis, and was pretty much with EJ Bartel in the entire spring game, the lead up to the spring game. And then, of course, he's developed a relationship through his visits on campus with some of Nebraska's top commits, and current players on campus too. We spotted him talking with Jamal Rule, who of course had a breakout performance in the spring game. That meant a lot to Brown as well. Soon to be a senior and set to join Nebraska's roster. Nebraska's been battling a few programs here as of late. Alabama recently offered. Vanderbilt has continued to stay in communication with him, as is Notre Dame. I don't think coming out of this visit that there's a 0% chance that he makes any other visits, but this visit needed to happen for him to, remind. I think it's a nice reminder for him. It was a nice reminder on Nebraska's end as well as who they have, why he committed in the first place, and I feel a lot more confident coming out of the weekend that Nebraska is going to be able to hold on to his commitment through the finish line at this point. And then, a big visit on the offensive side of things was Avery Michael, Oregon offensive tackle commit. It's the guy Nebraska's been after for some time. They were one of the first to offer when he started kind of emerging on the scene as a junior last fall. They were quick to reoffer when Geep Wade joined the staff. They've made a lot of effort here, but we're not able to get him on campus in January. And then ultimately he committed to Oregon after a visit there in February. And for the most part, over 30 other programs, and for the most part has pretty much cut off communication with most schools. Is stated that he's firmly committed to Oregon, but Nebraska's kind of been that one school there that hasn't let up, and the one school he's really been receptive to. And they got him to town this weekend. He was part of that Hudl Futures Forum event, but spent a lot of time with Geep Wade and Matt Rule. You can read our story on him over at InsideNebraska.com. This is his first visit, but he's paid close attention to Nebraska's offensive line play because this is the program he's been considering now for months. And just getting around campus, he sees improvement from the line under Wade. He feels the players told him the same thing. And Nebraska made it clear while he was on campus that they're ready to go toe to toe with Oregon. From a resource standpoint, I mean, Matt Rule just straight up laid it out all there and said, look, we've got the resources to go up against anybody. And he told Michael that. And this is a recruitment I don't think Nebraska's backing down from. And especially from how this weekend went, I don't think they have the need to. They not necessarily smell blood in the water is probably not the right word for this, but over the weekend, Oregon did lose another offensive line commit who flipped to USC. And kind of coming off of that, Nebraska's been pushing really aggressively in this recruitment. I don't expect them to slow down whatsoever. He only has one official visit locked in at this point to Oregon, but coming out of this first trip to Nebraska does say a return official visit to Nebraska is now under consideration. A few other quick hits in the 27th cycle from the weekend. Barrett Cottrell, in-state offensive lineman, continue to feel good about where Nebraska stands for him. He's just got to see a few more things. Wants to get out to Iowa one more time, and also wants to get out to Ohio State in April. But expect a decision in the very near future from him. Feel good about where Nebraska stands there. We'll see how this next Iowa visit goes and what could potentially happen on that Ohio State visit as well. Brock Frisbee, defensive lineman out of Archbishop Spalding in Maryland, is a target the staff is really intrigued by. Stands 6'3", 265 pounds, can play a few different spots along the line with a really impressive 82 inch wingspan. I think Nebraska made a good case for themselves this weekend. Still have some work to do, still battling some programs closer to home, but I think they've set themselves up well in that recruitment. Blake Benton, four-star linebacker out of Shakopee, Minnesota. This is a priority linebacker target for Rob Aurich and Rob Aurich here in the 2027 cycle, and they're working fast and really again aggressively here to try and beat out Penn State, who's emerged as a new leader, but you have a ton of programs here involved. You got a ton of Big Ten powers, ton of programs right here in the mix. It's going to be tough to pull away from Wisconsin and home in-state Minnesota and a couple of the programs I think that are really going to give him something to think about here in these next few months. But this is visit number 2 for him at Nebraska. I think the Huskers are well positioned for a return official visit if his recruitment gets to that point. I think regardless of what happens in these next couple of months, this is a target Nebraska is going to continue pushing for, even if he does ultimately end up committing somewhere else. So curious to see how Nebraska approaches that one moving forward. He's a priority target for the Huskers, and just in general, I said it coming out of the weekend between Benton's visit, Trey Gaithers in the 27 class, a rising kind of versatile linebacker slash safety target for Nebraska out of Charlotte, Providence Day School down there. Between those two, and then what Nebraska did in the 2028 class this weekend with Jameer Miles, the number 3 linebacker in the 28 cycle out of Carmel Catholic, the same program that Trey Taylor spent the first 3 years of his high school career at. As well as some of the work they did with Braden Bonnick, four-star linebacker out of Ridgepoint down in Houston. He's the number 7 linebacker in the 2028 cycle. Linebacker recruiting since Rob Aurich has gotten here has really started to heat up, and that's not to take away from anything Rob Dvorak has done in his time here. He's a relatively young coach who's picked up some pretty nice wins here at Nebraska, and Nebraska wouldn't be in this position without his effort as well. But really, I think it's more of the scheme paired with I think the way he teaches and the way Dvorak builds relationships. I think all of that combined, every linebacker that has visited Nebraska since Aurich has joined the staff has left with a higher impression of Nebraska than they came in with, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I think linebacker recruiting in particular is something that is about to take off around here in the months to come, just because of the effort that Dvorak has put in. And then I think the scheme and what this does for linebackers, it's a scheme that allows linebackers to play fast, play loose, trigger quickly. We talked to multiple top linebacker targets in town that really enjoyed their time around Aurich and Dvorak and really getting to see the scheme in action. I think getting to see the play of Owen Chambliss, and though he was limited, Dexter Foster, Will Hawthorne, and Pierce Mooberry and Vincent Shavers, the improved play of those guys over the weekend really helped as well. And on that note, I do want to kind of turn the page, talk about some of the 2028 targets in town. Big weekend for Nebraska on the 2028 side of things because of the Hudl Futures Forum, which came back to Lincoln. We talked about it last weekend, or last week, just some of the guys expected in town as a result of this event. Hudl held it last summer, and it really helped Nebraska get a nice leg up in the 2027 class. This year, I think this is going to help Nebraska get a nice leg up in the 2028 cycle, and it starts at the very top with Zayden Jernigan, the number 1 running back in the 2028 cycle out of Louisville, Mississippi. This was his first trip to Nebraska. He's held an offer from the staff. He's been through his coach, been in at least been in some type of contact with the staff, so he's familiar with the staff. Got on campus, really liked what he saw from the running backs, the running game, the push the offensive line got up front, and how he would potentially fit in this scheme. A recruitment that still has a lot of time to go. Still think he's figuring out some things, but like the first impression Nebraska made there. Feel the same way about Corey Cunningham, the number 4 defensive lineman in the country early on in the 2028 cycle out of Charlotte. Providence High School. Was on campus for the first time, a versatile D lineman. Met with a few different members of the staff and liked what he saw from the D line, but really liked the conversations he had with the staff, the facility. You can see, had some thoughts about Nebraska before of what he thought Nebraska was. Obviously, the expectations compared to what it was completely different. He really enjoyed the city of Lincoln, getting around the fan base at the spring game and learning about what Nebraska has to offer him. I think the same goes for Tayon Lawrence, four-star defensive lineman out of Bishop Gorman. He's the number 7 defensive line prospect early on in the 2028 cycle. He picked up an offer from the Huskers while on campus this weekend. A few guys I think that were back on campus in the 28 cycle that I think Nebraska's in really good position for. It starts with Giovanni Tuggle, number 3 safety in the country, top 25 prospect regardless of position. Nebraska's done some good work here for some time now. They got him on campus last fall. Uh, they've stayed in pretty frequent communication through his recruiting coordinator. And, I think Addison Williams here has built a really strong relationship and has developed a lot of trust. They're from the same part of Georgia, and that really helps. Of course, I think the familiarity, the comfort there has really helped. He was back on campus over the weekend. I spoke highly of what he saw from the safeties, his developing relationship with Addison Williams. Look, this is a recruitment that it's got a long ways to go. He's going to make plenty of visits. Georgia's going to make a strong run for him before this is all said and done. But the early work of Addison Williams has Nebraska in this top 5 group, if not even higher at this point. And I think Nebraska is well positioned to stick around at the very top of this recruitment until the very end. I can say the same thing for Bryce Smalls, 4-star interior offensive lineman from Archbishop Spalding, same school as Brock Frisbee, who I mentioned earlier. This was visit number 3 for him. He's been to Lincoln a few times before. Was back on campus over the weekend. The number 3 interior offensive line prospect here in this 2028 class. And a guy again, this is his first time really around Geep Wade and the new offensive line staff, but. I think this new between him and Lonnie Teasley, they're making a good impression between the play of the group, the development of the group, and really, I think with all of these guys, they get into the film room with with the coaching staff and on the offensive line, and that's where really things really start to click and really start to. I think that's when Nebraska really starts to create some separation for themselves. So again, some ways to go, I think, in both of those recruitments, but like what Nebraska has done early on. Feel the same way about Jevin Severson, number 2 tight end in the 2028 class out of Madrid, Iowa. He lives just 3 hours away from Lincoln, but this was just his second visit to the program as a recruit. He's been to Lincoln before, has played plenty of AAU basketball in the city, so he's plenty comfortable with the city. His family's growing, plenty comfortable with the city and the coaching staff. He's got a developing relationship with Marcus Satterfield, and he sees a lot of himself in Nebraska's tight end room. A couple guys in the room: Luke Lindenmeyer, Caden Echternock, Luke Sorensen as well. Just big guys that are powerful. They can block in line, can also work outside, and can catch downfield. He sees a lot of himself. I think he's intrigued by the development the tight end position in Nebraska. Has got plenty of options, as a Midwest tight end out of Iowa. You got Indiana in the mix. You're going to have Illinois in the mix, Notre Dame, Iowa, Iowa State, so on and so forth. But really like what Nebraska's doing here in this recruitment to kind of create some separation for themselves as the program that him and his family are early on really, really comfortable at. A couple other quick hitters to touch on in the 2028 cycle. There's a new offer out to Dylan Williams, edge rusher out of St. Francis Academy. He was on campus with his teammate, 2027 Nebraska uh, defensive line commit Jaden Travers. Feel good about where Nebraska's at with Travers. Think that's a firm commitment. We'll have to see how the fall plays out, but at this point, I think that recruitment's pretty much done. I think Nebraska's going to be able to hold on to him despite the D-line coaching change. I think it was good they got him back on campus to get around Corey Brown and the new defensive staff. But he fits well in the new defensive scheme. Could play end, but likely I think he's going to add some pounds and move to the inside. Has some versatility to his frame, and a guy that this staff is really excited to have, and truly kind of seen as kind of the building block of this defensive line class here in the 2027 cycle. 28 cycle, a couple other quick hitters. Anthony Busby Jr., 3-star linebacker at St. Louis University High in St. Louis. Nebraska's really battling Missouri in that one, but he's a guy who I think is starting to look at some options out of state, wanting to do something a little different, get a little further away from home. Nebraska is one of those options that's really starting to stick out to him because of the linebacker play. Like I mentioned, he loved watching Vincent Shavers on Saturday. Same goes for Stephen Moore, three-star linebacker out of Miami Central, the same program that produced Vincent Shavers. He grew up watching Shavers, and to see Shavers now do this at Nebraska, and for Nebraska to be recruiting him to do the same thing means a lot to him. And again, as I've stated, Nebraska has a lot of options here in this 2028 cycle at linebacker, but they're sure to backfill this group and give themselves some options coast to coast. So. And then last thing for me on this 2028 group, thought it was another, again, a couple of offensive linemen I just wanted to hit on. Carter Barrett was back in town, 6'5", 270 pounder, four-star and the number 8 interior offensive lineman out of Dowling Catholic in West Des Moines. Look, Nebraska's going to ultimately have to beat out Iowa for this commitment. And there's a few national programs involved, could see this come down to Iowa and Nebraska at the very end. And I think Nebraska's gotten them on campus a few times. I think they're continuing to chip away, and I think they're really starting to grow and create some comfort for themselves in this recruitment. Then out of Utah, Nebraska got their first shot at Toafinga, four-star offensive tackle out of Harriman, and Maui Tanada. I hope I'm saying that right. Out of Orem, Utah, the number 7 interior offensive lineman in the country. Both of these guys, big physical offensive line presences. Their first trip to Lincoln sounds like things went well. They connected well with some of the guys in town, like Severson, like Carter Barrett. So it was a good weekend of networking with fellow recruits, but also meeting the coaching staff and getting a feel for Nebraska. I'm curious to see what Nebraska's efforts are in Utah moving forward. They I think Donovan Raiola was their big relationship out there for a long time, and now that he's gone, and now that they have a few other coaches working in there, I'm curious to see who the relationship is and what the effort looks like moving forward in the state of Utah. And on that note, that's going to about do it for us. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We know we hit on a lot. But stay tuned to Inside Nebraska moving forward. We got a lot more coming out from this weekend. Again, we touched on some quick hitters here, but again, there were 50 recruits in town. There's a lot to get to. So we'll have a lot more over at InsideNebraska.com this week through this month. Spring's over, but recruiting's not really slowing down around here. We're going to have visits through the month of April, and we're going to hit the road. And so stay tuned for where we're at, where we're going, and we'll be back with another episode next week.